thank you again for joining us today as we celebrate our One Book, One Region 2014 wrap-up. It's been a fun summer, and you're also going to help us celebrate agriculture in this region. One Book, One Region chose Kristen Kimball's The Dirty Life nearly a year ago. It's a long time ago. Some of us read it almost a year ago, as our 12th title. I'm Sue Lantelmy, the Ledyard High School librarian, and I've been a part of the organization for 9 books. That would be 9 years. Our goal this year included choosing a title involving work, although Mark, Kristen's husband, would say that it's not work, it's farming. Those of you who join us today as farmers past, present, and future know it's hard firsthand the meaning of work. Our primary sponsor, Connecticut Humanities, has been exploring the topic of work for this whole year and will continue to do that for the rest of 2014. And that was our guide to choosing a book about work. They sponsored us, Kristen's visit, for the last couple of years. They've sponsored One Book, One Region author visits. So we thank them for that. I have been so wrapped up in making sure that all of the loose ends are tied for this event, except for the paint job in the parking lot, and apparently the air conditioning that had to be delivered today, that I lack the excitement for the book. But 2 students came through, Courtney and Carrie, and they came down yesterday to the library and said, "Can we check out the book again? We want to read it again tonight. So when we meet the author, we'll know exactly what we're talking about." They're so excited to meet you. It's so fun to have that excitement about a book. So it's my privilege to introduce Courtney Cliett. She's a senior here at our Ledyard High School Agri-Science and Technology School, and she also happens to be our local FFA president. So without further ado, Courtney.
Hi, my name is Courtney Cliett. I am the 2014-2015 Ledyard Regional FFA Chapter President. I want to welcome you to Ledyard High School to celebrate this year's One Book, One Region selection, The Dirty Life by Kristen Kimball. Her writing makes you feel as if you were there with her, experiencing the transition from urban living to the hard work and challenges of life on a farm. I'd like to thank Ms. Kimball for coming all the way from her home on Essex Farm in upstate New York to Ledyard to speak at our event. So without further ado, I proudly present a woman who, in the words of the FFA Creed, knows the joys and discomforts of agricultural life, Kristen Kimball.
I'm so happy we have the FFA in the house. Can I hear from the FFA? How many people are here from FFA? Woo! I'll send my thanks out first. Thank you so much to Sue Lantelmy and to Joanne Morris, who's chauffeuring me around today, and to all the members of the One Book Committee, and everybody here at the school who's worked hard to make this event happen today. I really, really appreciate being invited, and I'm really glad to be here. So, I know you're all busy people, and some of you have read the book, and some of you maybe have not read the book. So I thought that the first thing that we would do today is to get us all on the same page with some pictorial cliff notes that I brought that tell the whole story of the book in about 3 minutes, okay? That's me. 1999, I was living in the East Village of New York City. As you may surmise from this photograph, I was not, at this point, a farmer. I was a writer, and I did mostly travel writing, so I went around the world writing for Lonely Planet travel guides and for Travel and Leisure magazine, and I liked my life very much. But around that time, I read a book called Fast Food Nation. Does anybody know that book? Yeah. And I really credit that book for starting the movement that we are enjoying right now. It was about what's going wrong in our food system, and it made me really interested for the first time in where the food that I was eating was coming from. The other thing that that it made me interested in was to go seek out people who were farming locally and to see what they were doing. So I started this journey that brings me here to this day, to go and find farmers in the Hudson Valley, north of the city, who were, they were mostly young farmers who had just graduated from expensive liberal arts colleges, and they were living in tents and little shacks and trailers all over the Hudson Valley, growing an acre or two of vegetables. And that was a huge novelty in 2000, 2001. And I thought it would make a really good story. So I interviewed them, looking for interesting subjects, and eventually my search for interesting subjects led me to central Pennsylvania, where I met a very intelligent, very talkative, extremely energetic, and pretty much crazy farmer. Named Mark. Mark was running a vegetable CSA. Does everybody know what CSA is? Does anybody not know what CSA is? Should we talk about it? CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and it's a contract between the eaters on a farm and the farmer on a farm. And the members sign up, usually for a year, to pick up their food at that farm every week. The farmers get their money up front. The eaters get delicious food, and they know where it comes from. Mark was part of that movement. He was growing vegetables in Pennsylvania. And he had this cool crew of young kids, mostly from Penn State, who would come to his farm after classes and on the weekends. He was feeding 150 families vegetables. He was exactly what I wanted to write about until I did the most unprofessional thing that writers can do, which is that I fell in love with my subject. He cleans up all right, doesn't he? I fell in love with Mark, and I started spending non-professional time on his farm. And in the course of the development of our relationship, I also fell in love with farming. And in a few short and exciting months, he had left his farm in Pennsylvania, and I had left my apartment in New York City. And we moved to the North Country of New York State, way up near, not too far from the Canadian border. And we started a new farm together. And I was completely green, had never farmed in my life. Mark had been farming for 7 years. And he had this wild idea, this radical idea, that instead of just doing a CSA that produced vegetables, he wanted to produce everything that our members needed to eat, and he wanted to do it year-round. Now, I imagine there's some people in the room that have some experience farming, and you probably recognize what a crazy idea that kind of diversified farm would be, but I didn't. So I was all for it. I wanted to jump right in. What we started that year was the same model that we're continuing to do now, 11 years later. And it was a CSA that produced a full diet year-round for our members. It's free choice, so our members pay us one price at the beginning of the year, and they come to the farm every week and they take whatever they want in any quantity or combination from the farm for the week. And the final thing that was rather radical about it is that we decided to employ draft horsepower. So we started with a team of 2 horses, and they were our field power for the first 2 years when then we started adding more horses. We also have tractors on the farm, and sometimes I get so excited talking about horses that I forget to mention that we have and use tractors also on the farm. We use the horses exclusively in our vegetable fields for primary tillage and cultivation, but we also use our tractors for things like baling hay, and anytime we get in a tight spot and we need to do something quickly, we do use the tractors. So I thought I would just show you some pictures of what the farm looked like. Some of these pictures are from early on in our farm's life, and some of them are from this past week. So this is our herd of beef cattle. This was probably year 4 or 5 for us. We started off with Scottish Highland cattle, and we've diversified quite a bit. Right now we're using Scottish Highland as our brood cows, and we've added different bulls every year as terminal sires. So we've crossed to Angus, we've crossed to Hereford, and I'm going to get a little aggro-nerdy because I know I've got that kind of crowd here. But we've found that the Highland cattle work pretty well for us as brood cows, but we need something a little bit beefier to put meat on the animals before they go to slaughter. We raise our cows entirely on pasture. They don't get any grain. In the winter, they get hay and sometimes some haylage. We started raising pigs. At this point, we have 200 members, plus some different marketing streams, and we raise about 100 pigs a year. This was Strawberry, and she was a lovely, lovely sow who raised 13 piglets for us on pasture the year that this picture was taken. In the last couple years, we have gotten into sheep. They're sort of my pet project, my love project. We have 40 head right now, and they are primarily for meat, although we do give some of the wool to people who are interested in hand spinning or who want to just experiment with wool and felt things. It's so hard to take a good picture of chickens. I apologize for how dark this picture is. These are our laying hens. We have about 500 hens right now. They're on pasture all year until the winter when they go into greenhouses. And they're surrounded, which you can barely see in this picture, by an electric net to help keep the predators out and to keep the chickens confined. That's our super fancy chicken coop that you can see, which is made out of recycled billboard tarps. We are very, very cheap farmers, and we have access to these free billboard tarps, and so we make use of them for all of our construction projects. And the chickens can walk up a ramp, go into the coop, lay their eggs, and we have a little trap door that we can open on their nest boxes to pluck the eggs out without having to go into the coop. We also raise broiler chickens for meat. These are the chicks that are about ready to go to pasture. They arrive on the farm as 1-day-old chicks, and we raise them in brooders in a greenhouse until they're 3 weeks old. And at that point, they go out into the pasture, into these chicken tractors that we move down the field every day. So we have somewhere between 75 and 90 birds in each of these coops, and there's a little dolly that we use to move these coops along every day, so that the chickens can get fresh green grass, fresh worms, and the pasture gets nicely and evenly fertilized with all that wonderful chicken manure that they put onto the pasture. I have a friend who has an airplane, and at about this time of year, every year, I ask her to take me into her airplane so that we can fly over the field where the broiler chickens have been, because it looks like somebody has taken a bright green paintbrush and just painted streaks behind these coops where they've deposited all their good nitrogen. We do all of our own butchering and slaughtering on the farm. This is what our chicken slaughter day looks like. You can see the chickens in the tub in the foreground of the picture have already been plucked, and they're getting ready to be eviscerated. And we have a team of 4 to 5 people who process the birds every week when we process. And they can do 150 birds in about 2-3 hours. Pretty good team. We also have our own little dairy. We milk Jersey cows, and we started out with one cow, Delia, the lovely and beautiful Delia. We're now milking about 20 cows, and we have 20 heifers and calves who are coming up. All of our dairy cows are also grass-fed. They don't get any grain. They are out on pasture until about November, and then they come into a covered barnyard where they eat hay and haylage for the rest of the winter until the beautiful day that the grass is ready for them again. That's just cow porn. That everybody asks for pictures of Delia, and I don't have pictures of Delia, but this is a Delia granddaughter. Delia, for those of you who have read the book but don't remember, was the cow who had no ears. We grow about 16 acres of vegetables. This is what our vegetable field looked like early this spring. In the very background, you can see, on the left side of the screen, you can see a team of horses. That's how we do our weeding. We have a 2-horse cultivator. We have several 2-horse cultivators. And the cultivators will weed either side of the crop, 1 horse on either side of the crop, while the teamster rides on top of the machine right over the crop and steers the implement with their feet. So half the time you're looking forward, steering the horses, half the time you're looking down at the ground, trying not to kill your crop. And we can weed these rows in about 2 to 3 minutes, which is the time that it takes the horse to walk from one side of the field to the other. It works perfectly if we catch the weeds at their tiny, tiny white thread stage. But if they get beyond that, and the cultivator has a harder time with it, then we have to weed by hand. So we try to stay on top of those weeds, and those of you who have gardens out there, you know what I'm talking about. We also grow grain, both for our animals and for our humans that we feed. This is a wheat field. We focus on winter wheat because we find that we have a much better chance of getting winter wheat harvested. It's planted in the fall. It grows until winter sets in. It's dormant all winter, and then it wakes up in the spring and is harvested in July. We grow field corn. This was last year's crop. And again, this is to feed both humans and animals, but the animals eat a lot more of it than the people do. Like I said, our cattle are grass-fed, but we feed grain to our pigs and to the broiler chickens, so that's where the vast majority of our grain crop goes. I put this in there for you, Sue. We had a session last night, and Sue said, you don't have any pictures of winter in there, so I put this in there for you. We have a 100-day frost-free growing season up where we are in Zone 4. And so our winter is very long, and it can be very harsh. That said, our growing season is incredible. You know, we're so far north that the days are very, very long in the summer. So we focus not only on growing a lot of food in the summer when we can, but in growing crops that we can use to extend the season without greenhouses. We don't use greenhouses for season extension on our farm, but we do grow crops like kale. This is winter boar kale that we can harvest from the field even when it's covered with snow like this through January. So we have fresh food coming out of the field and into the share through January. We also focus on growing a lot of storage crops. So it's incredible how many calories worth of potatoes you can grow with a couple of horses and some seed potatoes. This was from last year's crop. This year's crop is looking just about as good as this. We also grow hardy things like beets, carrots, onions. We do a lot of cabbage, a lot of rutabaga, things that your grandparents probably remember having in their root cellar. We also do some fruit. We can never produce enough fruit to keep our 200 members happy, but we do our best. We do strawberries. It was a terrible strawberry year this year, but that was last year. We also do raspberries. We have summer-bearing raspberries and fall-bearing raspberries, and we're right in the heart of the fall raspberry season right now, so everybody's fingers are stained red all the time because whenever we have an extra 15 minutes, we're in the strawberry patch picking these days. Another big part of our work schedule is making hay. We need to make enough hay to keep our animals fed all winter. We farm about 800 acres right now, and the majority of that is hay ground and pasture ground. And this is Mark and my older daughter Jane looking out at the hayfield earlier this year when we were trying to decide if it was time to make our first cut hay yet. So that's the view from my office. As we've grown and begun to feed more people, we've gone from using 2 horse hitches to using 4 horse hitches for jobs like that, or even 6 horse hitches. This is a picture of plowing a 30-acre field last spring using 6 horses in what's called a 6-up configuration. So you're steering the forward set of horses with one set of lines and the back set of horses with another set of lines. And that pulls a 2-bottom plow, which for those of you who are tractor farmers probably seems pretty weenie, but for people who have used walking plows or 1-bottom plows, it's amazing to be able to cover the field in half the time that it would take with 1 bottom. Because of our commitment to alternative and fossil-free energy, we've also added solar panels to the farm in the last 2 years. These got plugged in 2 years ago this coming February, and it's a 25 kilowatt array. When we plugged them in the first time, they produced about the exact amount of energy that we needed to run the farm, the exact amount of electricity that we needed. And we've grown a bit since then, so we're looking to put together some grants to add some more solar panels, but it's pretty cool to go out to the barn and watch the meter run backwards on a nice sunny day. So I'm going to pause here and see what I've left out. So ask me questions about our farm and how it runs and our membership and anything else that you might be curious about. Yes? Yes.
How many people do you have working for you different seasons of the year?
How many people do we have working for us? This summer we had 15, and that's typical for us in the summer. Half of those people were employees, and half of them were on the farm as part of our Essex Farm Institute, which is a training nonprofit that we started 2 years ago. And they come either for a day, a week, or a 3-month stint. And we had half of our people last year as employees, half as interns. Most of the interns have gone back to school now, and we're down to a crew of, I believe, 6 right now. And we could use some more hands for harvest season, but after harvest season, we get through harvest season, we can make the farm work for the winter with 6 people. I shouldn't say easily, but it works with 6 people.
So do they stay on your farm?
They don't stay on our farm. We provide a housing stipend, and they rent. Usually they live in a group house that they rent together just off of the farm. So they're within a mile or 2, but we found that it works better if they can go home. And we don't have to see them, they don't have to see us, they can go talk about us and then come back the next day and, and be ready for work again. So, yes. She's asking about the runaway story that was in the book. So if you have ever been involved in a runaway, you know that it is the most terrifying thing. She just said it's not exciting, it's terrifying, and it is. And yes, we have had other incidents, including with those 6 horses that I showed you. That day, I was driving them, and I got hooked on a big log because I took a corner wrong, and they all started to run. And they're 2,000 pounds each, and I'm a 110-pound woman. And luckily, my husband was there, and we got them stopped and unhooked before anything terrible happened. But it's part of the game, you know. I don't know anybody who has worked horses for a long time who hasn't had a runaway or a wreck. And we try to train our people to know how to react when something bad happens. I haven't had an incident for the last couple of years, but for a while there I had 1 problem a year, just about, and they were all terrifying. And I still, when I think about it or when I look at pictures that remind me of it, I still get a little bit panicked. So, yeah. So this is a great question. If the tractors are more efficient, which they are by about 10 times, and the horses are problematic, why do we do it? And the answer is twofold, and my husband and I would probably give you slightly different answers. I would say that we do it because we love horses and they're beautiful, and we like the work that they bring with them, and we like the kind of farmers that it makes us to go slowly. There's also the environmental side of it. We really would like to see a farm in our lifetime that produces more calories than it consumes, and we think that draft animal power is a part of that equation. We're working toward figuring out the efficiency of biofuel on the farm scale and growing, say, oil seeds to produce biofuel to fuel tractors on the farm. There are some people who think that that is a more efficient use of land than using the draft horses if our goal is to have zero fossil fuel on the farm. I think Mark and I have both learned that we love our big audacious goals, but that we're also happy when we don't quite reach them. So I don't know that it will ever be a zero fossil fuel free farm, but it's something important to us that we're working hard toward. Agriculturally, I think it's really valuable to train these young farmers on horses because it teaches them slowly, and it teaches them to be very conscious of each step of the work, so that by the time they go onto a tractor, they absolutely know how to use that machine, and they absolutely know the goal of what it is that they're doing. So if they're doing tillage, they know what it should look like from the ground up. Does that answer your question? Yeah. But really, it's just because we love horses. Yes.
Did you finally go to milking machines?
Yes, she said, did you finally go to milking machines? We did. I can tell you're a farm girl. Yes.
My wrist.
Yes.
Your lifestyle is very different from a lot of us in the audience. What did you see as the positive and negative impacts on family life?
What are the positive and negative impacts on family life? I really believe that there's a reason that the most common configuration of farms is the family farm. I think that it takes the unity and teamwork of a family to make a farm work on the long term. And it also is the point around which the family is organized. So our family works on the farm, but we also play on the farm, and it's our recreation and it's our joy. And it holds us together, I think, in a really real way. The downsides are that the farm almost always comes first. So if we're bringing in hay and it's about to rain, then everything else becomes our second priority. And I think there are times at which that is difficult, especially for young children who don't quite understand yet the urgency behind our decisions. So there's definitely good and there's definitely bad, but I think that the good outweighs the bad for our family. Other people have other priorities and make other choices. So she's asking about the acreage of the farm. The home farm that we started on is 500 acres, all contiguous. We lease another few hundred acres in the neighborhood. It's all within a mile of our driveway, but some of it is across different roads. We have a lot more agricultural land available in our area than we have farmers right now, and so we have the luxury of having free or very cheap leases on the land that we don't own, and that gives us the benefit of being able to practice a very extensive form of agriculture instead of an intensive form of agriculture. We don't have to maximize what's coming off every single square yard of our farm. We can take what we need when we need it, if that makes sense. Yes?
You mentioned in the book that the area diet.
Have many other farms taken on this full diet approach? It's starting. It's really interesting to watch. We've had many people work for us in the last 11 years, and 6 of them have started similar farms in our region. There's another full diet farm in Oregon that I correspond with to see what kind of trouble and joy they're getting into in Oregon. There is one in Vermont. And I know that there was an article in the Washington Post this year about a cluster of full diet farms just outside of DC. I think there were 3 of them that have started up in the last year. So it's not for everyone. It's for the farmer who likes and can handle a very complex management structure. It requires a lot of infrastructure. But for people like us who really thrive on doing something different every day and don't mind having employees, because obviously you can't do this on your own for the long term. I think it's a really incredible model. It captures, just from a marketing perspective, it captures a lot of food dollars from every family who belongs to the farm. A membership is $3,700 for a single adult and $7,000 for a couple. So that's really nice guaranteed income, and it's a lot easier to do that marketing once than to try to sell it every day at a farmer's market or through our farm store or any other venue that we've tried. So from a marketing perspective, it's pretty great. Yes? Do we have a stand that we sell produce at on the side of the road? We just opened one this year, and it's like my surprise new love. I absolutely love the retail store. I spent most of the summer out there this year, and it was great because we get quite a bit of tourist traffic coming by the farm, and we can sell things like maple syrup and T-shirts and bags that bring some income into the farm. And we also sell produce and eggs and raw milk from the store. But the heart of our business, probably 85% of our business, still comes from our local membership. We also feed 2 school systems in our area. We feed them vegetables, eggs, a couple other products in there every once in a while. We do a little bit of restaurant work, and we do a summer camp. So those are our big sort of institutional accounts, but the majority is still coming from the membership, the local membership. Do I still have time for writing? It's the big guilt of my life that I don't have another book out yet, so I start to sweat when you ask me that. I'm leaving on Friday for a month at a writer's colony, and I hope to really push my next book forward while I'm gone. I haven't had very much time in the last 2 years, mostly because of small children, more than the farm. They seem to take up more of my creative brain space, but I have another book in the works, which is a sequel to this one, and I hope to get it moved a good bit forward in the next month. So, yes. Yeah. Yeah. She said, how do you handle the danger on a farm with small children? And that's very real. I mean, we have bulls, we have big equipment, we have horses, we have a lot of things that could be dangerous to children. And so there's 2 parts to the answer. Number one is there are certain things that I just don't do with the children. If we're working cattle or we're doing tillage, then the kids are either with somebody else or I'm not doing that work, which is part of the reason I got the sheep, because they're small enough that I can keep the kids more or less safe while we're working sheep, and the kids love the lambs, and it's just a nice fit for the family. The other part is something that my pediatrician told me when I was bringing the children in for the first time when they were really little. And he said, oh, I see you live on a farm. Well, you know all the special dangers on a farm. And I said, yes. And he said, I'll tell you something. He said, I very rarely see farm children in my office for stitches and broken bones, because farm children learn very early on that they have a limit to what they can do safely, and they know that if they go over the limit, that there's real physical world consequences to those actions. And I have found that that's very true with my kids. They've never had stitches, they've never broken a bone, and they're very respectful of the boundaries that we set for them when they know that those boundaries protect their physical well-being. So knock on wood, we'll continue without anything terrible happening. Yes?
Her blog, it's marvelous.
Oh, thank you so much. She's.
I've been following it with great interest.
Thank you. I have a blog on my website, which is KristenKimball.com, and I try to update it regularly, usually once a week on Fridays. And it's primarily a communication between us and our members, but I also put it out there with pictures for anybody in the public who's interested in following along with whatever we're doing on the farm. I think maybe we'll take a break from questions and answers right now and move on to a little more material, and there will be a chance in a little while to ask more questions. Let me see how we're doing on time. Okay. So, do you guys want to hear a reading, or do you want me to talk about stuff? Who wants to hear a reading? And who wants to talk? Oh, we got more talkers. Okay. So we're going to skip the reading part. This was what I was going to read. Does everybody remember the section about Jet, the stud dog? That is a picture of Jet in his prime. He's now an old man of 10, and he produced a really lovely puppy named Mary, who has been with us for the last year, and Jet's now neutered, so his breeding days are over. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we sign up for this crazy job. There was an op-ed in the New York Times recently that carried the title, "Parents, Don't Let Your Children Grow Up to Be Farmers." Did anybody see that one? And I felt a little bit defensive about that op-ed since I read it, so I'm going to talk a little bit, for those of you who read the book and wonder why in the world one would sign up for this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits and what it is that we truly, truly love about this job. The number one thing that I don't think I could ever shake myself loose from is the food. One of the best benefits of being a farmer is that no matter how poor we are, we get to eat like kings. And the novelty of that and the deep pleasure of that has never worn off for me. Mark and I don't go out to dinner very often, but when we do, we're more often than not disappointed because no matter how skillful the cooking is, that's only one piece of it, and we don't get food that's ever as fresh and as good as the food that we grow on our own farm. There's also the wonder and beauty of being surrounded by abundance, and I wrote about that in the book, but 11 years on, the magic and the mystery of that has not worn off for me. To walk into a field that is full of food still gives me that feeling, excuse me, of magic, wonder, and safety that no matter what happens in the world, we will always eat. And as simple as that sounds, it's very profound. And right next door to that is the pleasure of being able to grow food for our neighbors and for the people in our community. Every Friday night, 200 people roll into the farm, and they get out with their strollers and their sleds and their baskets and their glass jars and everything else, and they come to the pavilion where we've laid out all of our vegetables. They pick out everything that they want for the week. They load up their carts. They catch up with their neighbors. The kids go play with the new baby animals or splash around in the pond, and it's this amazing moment that happens every week of community. And that, too, is still, 11 years in, magical to me, and I can't see ever wanting to give that up. Joanne had asked earlier about the effects of farming on a family, and I included it in this list of why we farm. I feel incredibly privileged to be able to do my work and have my home in the same place and to do it as a family. During the summer when kids are out of school and the days are long, every night after dinner, this is what we do. We put the 3-year-old in the backpack and the 7-year-old pulls on her boots, and we go out and we do our farm walk and we see what's happened on the farm that day, and we make a list of what needs to be done tomorrow. And we're together as a team and as a unit, and I don't know very many jobs in the world where you get to do that. And so I list that in the column of blessings that a farm brings to a family. This is the slide that represents the joy of work. So there's this idea in our culture that we should put a lot of value on convenience and a lot of value on leisure. And my own experience of the world is really that hard work tends to make us very happy. As long as it's work that comes with a purpose and work that you believe in and work that you take pleasure in, I think that hard work makes you happier. Does anybody agree with me? Yeah. And then finally, I believe that fostering the growth of living things makes us happy. And Courtney read part of the FFA Creed, which I love, which is about how the joys and the challenges, can you say it again? The joys and discomfort of agricultural life is what makes it all satisfying. And it turns out that this idea that fostering the growth of living things makes us happy is not just my opinion. There's a psychologist and farmer named Dr. Michael Rossman who has studied this, and he has called it the agrarian imperative. And he's done research that concludes that there's a basic human drive to produce life's essential materials, and that we have an innate urge to make food out of dirt and work. And we've been doing it for 10,000 years, so the behavior is essential to the survival of our species, and we pass it along to future generations. And it's how we're wired. And Dr. Rossman concludes that farming culture, these behaviors, are very easy to acquire, and they're very difficult to get rid of. And it takes 3 generations to get farming out of your bones, and it only takes 1 generation to put it back in. So give me a wave if you grew up on a farm. Now keep your hands in the air. Give a wave if you have a parent who farmed, or a grandparent, or a great-grandparent. Keep them all up. And now put your hands up if you think that, like me, you might be a first-generation farmer. Everybody up, all them up. And give them a good wave around. So if you look around at how many arms were in the air just now, think about all the good farming that could be done with that group of people and their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. And put your hands together for that. So I imagine that among those hands that were up, there may be some parents who have kids who are experimenting with farming. Yeah, I see a few. We're in this place culturally right now where there's a wave of young people who are intelligent, educated, entrepreneurial, and really ambitious, who want to get into farming. And at the same time, we have a market that's ready and willing and eager to buy the food that they're going to produce. So it's this beautiful time to be a farmer. But as a parent, and as a person who is a farmer who has a parent, I know that you might not be entirely enthusiastic about the idea of your kids going into farming. And if you're apprehensive about it, that's good, you should be. On the other hand, there are parents who are all in with their idea of the kids becoming farmers and believe that that will offer them a very sweet, bucolic, and wholesome life. And those people should probably let go of that idea. The truth is, having a farm is more like having a gambling problem. It's risky, it's dangerous, and it is highly addictive. And those are all good things. And I'm going to tell you a story, and then we'll do a little more question and answer, okay? I think I have a picture here. Let's see. Yeah. We have a young man named Scott who is 24 years old, and he's been working on our farm since last fall. But the story I'm going to tell you takes place the first time I met him, when he was 22, and he was working at another farm in New York State. We're friends with the people who own that farm. Their names are Don and Mary Rose, and they, like us, are part of the little club that uses draft animals for their tillage. They farm with horses and with mules. And they also teach other people how to do it. So I was there last year to work horses and mules with Don and to learn some things about the way that Don trains his young working animals. And they had 2 young humans there, too, as interns. One was Scott, and the other was his friend named Daniel. So we spent that early spring afternoon working with the young horses and mules. And Don has a Percheron mare named Polly, who is big and beautiful, but also rank and ill-mannered. And she got to Don's farm after she had washed out of a sleigh ride business because she was far too much trouble. And she's just one of those horses who has a look in her eye that says, I'm going to do my best to test you, and if I can, I will take advantage of you and your inexperience. And so I watched these 2 young green teamsters struggle with Polly all morning. And the task that they were given was so simple. They were supposed to move this giant log from this place over here to that place over there. But it was so complicated. Polly wouldn't stand. Polly was tangled in the traces. Polly wanted to run and not walk. She wanted to go home instead of stand still. And these 2 boys were getting dragged all over the field with a big log chained to a horse, trying not to get run over, getting firmly corrected by Don, working hard physically and emotionally to try to figure out where their energy and the horse's energy worked in harmony together and not in opposition. And it was one of those days that all of us who work with animals have, working with draft horses in particular, that makes a tractor look really sweet. And that night, Mary Rose made dinner for the boys and for me. And it was a delicious roast of lamb from her flock, and rosemary from her greenhouse, and potatoes and carrots from our farm. And she poured each of the 3 of us a generous glass of scotch. I was a writer, as you know, before I was a farmer, and I'm never really entirely out of journalist mode. I tend to interview everyone instead of having a normal conversation. And I'm always curious about what brings people to this beautiful, difficult life that I love so much. Both of these boys had grown up in the suburbs. Their parents were accountants and urban planners. So I questioned them on why, of all things in the world, they were doing this. And Scott says, farming is something you can do without messing people over. He didn't actually say messing, but clean it up for him a little bit. And this is important, I think, because he's not alone there. In this wave of young people that we see, we're watching them, and they're motivated from the outside by a desire to make the world a better place. And suddenly, because of changes in marketing models and in consumer demand and in information technology, and this shift in the culture that I was talking about, for the first time in generations, becoming a farmer is actually a viable career path for first-generation farmers. And it's one that allows us to express our love and concern for the world and for the people who live in it. And that's a profound thing. So then Daniel says, the first idea of my childhood was, I want to be outside, and I didn't know how I could make that happen. And I could hear this panic in his voice at the memory of that, and of thinking that growing up meant that he would have to be trapped inside his whole life, and also a relief that he had found something that let him out of that box. And this thing, working outside makes me happy, is something that I hear from every person who comes to work at our farm, and something that rings very true for me. Working outside makes me happy, and it's so simple, and it's so profound. And it is so lost on most people, especially people, like me, who had fancy educations, and who think either consciously or unconsciously that outdoor work is for smart people, and indoor work is for smart people, and outdoor work is for everyone else. So then I asked them, what have you learned from working with horses? Because watching Don teach them that day, I'd gotten the sense that he wasn't just teaching them to be good horsemen. He was teaching them how to be good men. And Scott says, you have to be confident that you will get done what you want to get done. That's how you get there. And that also rang true with me. One of the best life lessons that I've learned from partnering with working animals is that they generally want to do what you want them to do. But you have to be darn clear on what you want and proceed slowly and with great patience. And if you don't know exactly what you want the animal to do, you have zero chance of the animal doing it. And it's the same thing with life, right? If you know exactly what you want and why, and you envision it until it's crystal clear, and you add a lot of determination and a lot of hard work, the world wants to bring it to you. And that's my experience of working with animals and of the world. So then I asked Daniel, what have you learned from working with horses? It's a good thing we had the scotch going because they would have been highly annoyed with me otherwise. And he says, everything else seems less daunting if you can do this. So, parents, if your children have a farming problem, don't despair. It is addictive, but unlike a slot machine or the poker table, a farm will try their characters in a crucible from which they will emerge a stronger and better adult. We're not all going to be farmers, but we are all eaters. And we can all be eaters who support our local farmers. And so here's the thought that I want to leave you with. And I believe this with my whole heart. If you change the way you eat, you change the way that you think. And if you change the way that you think, you change the way that you act. And if you do that enough times, person to person to person, you change the world. Thank you.
We're going to try to orchestrate something, so please don't move. We're trying to get Kristen and Courtney. I could get that. Yes. Courtney and Kristen are heading down there to try to beat the crowd before you head down there. Thank you, Kristen. The Agri-Science and Technology School's been busy the last couple of weeks cleaning, getting ready for your company.